Muy buenas tardes, maestros, maestras, asesores externos del Programa Nacional de Inglés en todo el país. Pues continuamos el día de hoy nuevamente con la segunda semana, en este día miércoles, de actividades relacionadas con la metodología de la enseñanza del idioma inglés. Y en esta ocasión quiero comentarles que sabemos que hay algunas definiciones que se están por tomar con respecto a los consejos técnicos escolares, las actividades previas de regreso, y nosotros en el Programa Nacional de Inglés sabemos que esta actividad es una actividad voluntaria, es una actividad de apoyo, de fortalecimiento, que no está ligada necesariamente a todos estos protocolos relacionados con el regreso a clases. Sin embargo, de existir alguna indicación que nos tuviera que hacer tener un espacio previo al inicio de clases, suspender temporalmente las actividades, lo daremos a conocer en los avisos de los salones que ustedes integran en la herramienta de Google for Education. Sin embargo, por el momento, pues seguimos continuando. El día de hoy tenemos la participación nuevamente del Consejo Británico a través de su jefa de educación básica en esta organización, que es la maestra Liliana Sánchez. La maestra Liliana Sánchez, además de ser la jefa de educación básica, anteriormente ha fungido como gerente nacional de exámenes. Ella realizó estudios en Reino Unido de maestría en enseñanza del idioma inglés como lengua extranjera y ha ocupado diferentes puestos de dirección y gerencia en diversas instituciones educativas y centros de idioma, tanto en la región de México, del Caribe, y bueno, conoce perfectamente bien las necesidades del programa nacional. Ha venido acompañando desde este otro espacio, que es el Consejo Británico, una serie de tareas compartidas, y en esta ocasión es quien se va a hacer cargo de las dos presentaciones que en un momento más les van a describir. Bienvenida, Liliana, y pasamos a que hagan el detalle de la presentación de tus dos intervenciones. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, licenciado Sark, y muchas gracias. Estamos muy agradecidos por esa oportunidad de participar en las jornadas de capacitación virtual, que estamos seguros les van a ayudar a los profesores y pues de esa manera podremos apoyar a la educación en México. Muchas gracias. Y bueno, nuestra siguiente webinar será en inglés, lo estará dando nuestra jefa Liliana Sánchez, y quiero platicarles un poquito de lo que va a ser esta presentación. Cambiaré al idioma inglés porque de aquí en adelante la presentación y toda la actividad será en inglés. Entonces, acerca de assessment. So, assessment and literacy is about understanding of familiarity with the theory and practice of assessment. Language assessment literacy has been defined in a variety of ways, but Felcher in 2012 provides one of the more comprehensive definitions. He said, the knowledge, skills, and abilities required to design, develop, maintain, or evaluate large-scale standardized and/or classroom-based tests, with a level of familiarity with test processes and awareness of principles and concepts that guide and underpin practice. In these webinars, we'll address these issues with the focus of becoming more aware of assessment practices of speaking and listening skills. So let's start with this webinar with Liliana Sánchez. Thank you, Liliana. Let's start.
Thank you very much, Adri. Thank you very much to Licenciado Sark and PRONI for having hosted us, invited us to collaborate here. Okay, so thank you everyone who's watching. I'm going to have the last two slots for the British Council. I'm going to be talking first about assessment of speaking, and then at 3, we will talk about assessment of listening. The reason why we chose these two very important skills is mainly response to the fact that at the level of education that we're talking about, basic education and beginner levels of English, it's very important that we situate the importance of evaluating a productive and a receptive skill. Definitely reading and writing, known as the learned skills, are not acquired like speaking and listening. And hence, they don't need that much exposure. So something that we really need to know is what happens with these two skills that are defined as acquired skills, that are very similar to how we acquire our first language, whatever that first language is, or mother tongue, as you prefer to call it. So it is very important. That's why I wanted to give these sort of introduction to it. Why did we select them? Because according to British Council study and research, listening is by far the most difficult skill to assess. I'm talking about teaching, assessment. And speaking poses the second greatest challenge. That's why we wanted to address these two ones. Now, there's another thing. The end of the day, a lot of people, when we talk about learning the language as a foreign language, one key objective and aim is to help people communicate, and communicate in a verbal, face-to-face way rather than writing. Writing has got a lot of complexities as well as reading. But if we can manage or we can achieve that people communicate and that our learners communicate in the spoken word, a lot is achieved. So that's why we're focusing on this too. I want to make another sort of comment or disclaimer, if you want. The methodology that we are presenting to you is adaptable to your context. We are not trying to tell you how to do things, because only you know how to do those, because you are the one in the classroom. What we are proposing here is showing you and sharing with you the best practices that we know about, and those things that theory informs well about assessment and these two skills. So it is very important that we understand this. I am not here, I'm not going to pretend that I know what you go through in your classrooms. I've been a teacher, I am a teacher trainer, I'm a class observer. I like to observe classes a lot. In my time as ISIL moderator, I did that a lot. And now as Delta assessor, I do. And I always hold a lot of respect for colleagues like you. I was there many years ago. And so with all respect to your profession, to what happens in your classroom, I want to propose to you this methodology, and I hope you find it useful. And if not entirely useful for you, that you find certain aspects of it that you can adapt and take into your classroom. So without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and let's talk about speaking and how to assess speaking. So I hope technology doesn't fail me today, because things tend to be a bit rough with technology when you are not savvy. But here we go. Okay. I hope you can see my screen. So it seems like, yes, you are seeing my screen now. Okay, so let's talk about assessing speaking. And I'm going to ask you to interact a little bit with me, even if it is not in the way that I always like, when you asking question and answering question. This presentation is based on the studies of Alan Gordon, our assessment specialist in Japan, and it has been delivered all over the world. And again, it adapts to your needs. What are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about what is it that speaking involves. And once we understand what it involves, we will be able to make decisions about how to assess it. And then we will have hopefully some minutes for some questions and some answers. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about speaking. What does speaking involve? And here I would like you to interact with me. Why do we speak with others? And I propose 3 things for you. Because we want to achieve a social purpose, because we want to achieve a transactional purpose, a functional purpose, of all of the above. So can you in the chat write A, B, C, or D, or A, C, B, D, whatever you think the answer is based on your knowledge and experience. What kind of things are we trying to achieve when we speak? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think and write things on the chat, please. Yes, just write A, B, C, D. What do you think? Okay. So I see that yes, Jessica, all of the above, definitely. Teresa, you go more for a social purpose. Sonia, you're saying all of the above. I think most of you are saying all of the above. And it is, in fact, all of the above. When we speak, and I'm talking about any language, your mother language, your mother tongue, your first language, your second language, foreign language, any definition of what all the languages are for you. We do it because we want to achieve three basic things. We want to interact with people. We do it because we want to exchange ideas, catch up with friends, just being friendly, just meeting your future spouse, husband, fiance, or whatever you want, right? Just because we are human beings. And this is interesting because this is where the social practices in your books and in your curriculum make sense. It is precisely because we are social human beings that we need to speak. I don't know if you know a little bit of history of language development, but there are terrible stories about people who were deprived from speaking. And I'm not going to get into that, but there are stories about, for example, the Jungle Book is based on a real story where someone was deprived from any social purpose of using the language. So no language was learned, except the language of animals. So if you have seen that film, watch it again, and it's based on a real case, a boy in France. So we human beings, when we interact with others, we have this need to communicate. But we also do it for transactional purposes. So our aim is we speak not only to be social friendly with someone else, but because we need things. We need basic things. We need to satisfy our basic needs, like to eat, like to dress. So we need to ask people for, how much something is. Can I have this? Could you help me with the other? So that is transactional need or a transactional purpose. And then we do it because of functional purposes. Now, this is interesting because when I saw this presentation, I thought, yes, this slide will communicate to teachers in basic education using the PRONI program. Because one thing is to have the functions of the language and to realize them. I can realize a lot of functions and I still obtain nothing. So I know how to say hello. I know how to greet. That's the function. Hello, everyone. But if I'm alone in my room or in my living room, as I am, and we say, hello, everyone, but there's nothing around, not even my dog is around. So I am realizing the function, but without any transactional purpose, not even a social purpose, because there's nobody here. So this is interesting. So we talk about, we speak the language because of these reasons. And it's important that you see that there are different ways in which we do it. So why do we speak with others? And why we want to achieve, sorry, I went back. What does it involve when we speak? Well, when we speak, we have to have a message. We know that. We have to organize that message for the listener. We have to use a range of language for different purposes. And when I refer to language, I'm also referring to paralinguistic language. In other words, I'm also referring to body language. So when I say, hello, everyone, I'm also using body language. We have to be accurate so that people don't misunderstand us. And that sometimes is common when we have a foreign language. So we have to know exactly what we're saying. I'm going to give you an example. Every time I'm driving with my partner in the car, and I see, for example, a dog walking by or a person crossing the street, I say to him, careful, because in my head, careful is the equivalent of the Spanish con cuidado. And he always says, no, say mind the dog. Mind the road, mind the person, not careful. Because for him, and by the way, my partner is British, for him, his first language, when I say careful, it means something else. It means watch out. So there's always this misunderstanding. Unfortunately, I can never get it in my head, and I keep on saying careful instead of mind. But the misunderstanding is not grave. I mean, we don't have an accident until now, but but he always goes like, when I say careful. And he always reminds me, just say mind the dog, and I won't have to, be cautious about what I'm doing when I'm driving. So that's the kind of accuracy we need. We need fluency. We need to be able to converse and not have people waiting for us saying, and we also have to be intelligible. Now, I'm going to take a liberty here. I speak the way you hear right now because, number one, I studied in institutions that use British English. I also work for the British Council, but I learned English from a different input. My first language teacher for many years was Indian. And sometimes if I try, I can remember how he spoke to me. And I really, really like it. But intelligibility has nothing to do with the accent. Nothing. Sometimes, just to, just to bother my partner, I try to go a little bit American and just change my accent. But that's not, that for him makes no difference. For people, it makes no difference. The important thing is that I don't say sheep when I want to say ship, and that I don't say a sheet of paper instead of, and I'm not going to say it. You see, we have to be intelligible not to get into problems. But the accent is irrelevant. The accent sometimes is because that's something you want to do because you want to sound like that. But it really makes no difference in speaking. And a lot of people have said that accent is identity. There's a lot of theory about it. So if you don't lose your mother tongue accent, it's fine because that's who you are. And finally, you need to contribute to keeping the conversation going, which here, for example, I'm finding ways for you to give me feedback. I have got someone helping me with your communication because there's a lot coming up. So somebody's helping me saying, oh, look, somebody said something to you. But conversation has to be both ways. Okay, so I'm not going to make the same mistake. And here we go. What am I going to do now? I'm going to let you watch a very short clip. It's about less than a minute about what speaking is. And then we'll talk about it. I really hope that technology doesn't betray me today. And here we go. I'll be very alert in case my audio is not optimal. Let's see.
Most of us speak every day. It's part of who we are. We speak to our friends, our colleagues at work, even to ourselves. When we speak, our brain is engaged in a whole range of activities, from finding words to putting them together in a meaningful way. Because we speak to different audiences, for different reasons, and under different conditions, we can look at speaking as being multidimensional. Since an assessment should try to replicate as closely as possible the real-life use of the language in terms of the brain activity and the social conditions in which the language is used, a test of speaking needs to be as close to the context we're interested in as possible. So, if I want to test your ability to ask and follow directions, I should include this activity in my test.
So, what is speaking? Well, as in the video, we propose that speaking requires certain considerations. You need an audience, as I told you. If you don't speak to anybody, then you need a reason to speak, and then you need the right conditions to do it. Again, I'll give you my silly example. Hello, everyone, when there's nobody here. I don't have an audience. I don't have a reason to say it, and the conditions are quite unusual. Now, what else is required when you speak? speaking is a very complex brain activity or brain process, that a lot has to happen in your brain so that you can speak. And on top of that, social conditions have to be understood by the speaker, of course. Let me give you a very simple example. When we teach modal verbs, can, could, should, must, a lot of people have a lot of difficulty explaining this, because they say, how do I explain modal verbs of, say, permission? Can I go to the toilet? Could I go to the toilet? Might I go to the toilet? Might I use your toilet? Would you be so kind as to lend me your toilet? What do you say? When do you say? Everything has to do with the conditions and who you're speaking to. Social purpose. So when I'm talking to, say, my mother, and I go visiting her house, I say, Mom, can I use your toilet? Probably I wouldn't even say it, you know, I would just go in. But if I'm, for example, at your house, and I've never been to your house, and then I want to use your toilet, I will have to say, excuse me, Karina, could I use your toilet? But then they say that sometime, well, hopefully one day, I'll be invited to Buckingham Palace and see the Queen. And then I need to go. And then what did you say to the Queen? Her Majesty, would you be so kind as to lend me your toilet? You see, everything has got a purpose. But when it comes to the language, you also have to analyze the social conditions in which the language takes place. And that's how I sometimes try to explain modal verbs of permission. All of them are correct. It all depends on who you are using the modal verb with. That's just to give you an example. So what is the speaking? The speaking is to understand that there's someone listening. Even in a monologue, like me, I feel like I'm in a monologue with you. I know who you are. You're PRONI teachers, you are external assessors, but you are also teachers, full-time teachers, but you also work in secondary. Some of you share the job between public sector, private sector. I try to understand who I'm talking to. And you are all ELT teachers, otherwise this would be quite a weird conversation. So we need to know our audience, like a student in a seminar group, a foreign tourist, a family member, for example. You need to understand the reasons why you're speaking, to discuss a paper, to ask a favor, to give directions, to greet someone. And then you also need to understand that the brain activity is going on. You need to find the right words, the right modal verb for the social context. You need to put them together in a meaningful way, otherwise they make no sense. You need to sequence them logically, you need to be coherent, and you need to find the right tone and moment. Oh yeah, that's also another brain activity that is quite complex. And then you have the social conditions. You have to be, formal sometimes, you have to be informal in others. You need to know if this is an academic audience, if it is a job interview, if you have debts. So, excuse me, Mom, could you please lend me a couple of quids? You will need to know who you're talking to, where, and when you're talking to these people. So, if that is speaking, imagine trying to assess it. So in the video, we heard that the best proposal is to try to replicate what happens in real life. And so writing tests for speaking is one of the most challenging things to do. So what do you think the issues might be in assessing speaking? I'm going to let you think for a minute. What do you think? If you can write something in the chat, that would be brilliant, because I can read some of them. So what do you think the issues might be in assessing speaking? Think about it. Too many students in your class? The level of your students? Grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary? What are the issues that for you might be of concern? Okay? Good. Now, I'm going to show you some proposal. Well, it could be that one issue, and these are just some ideas because I know that you have a lot. Infinite issues, Millie. You said infinite issues. Yeah, a lot. Let's just try to summarize some of these. Being objective. And this is interesting because the issues that you present, you're talking about the issues of the learner. And probably what I'm telling you is the issues of the assessor. And this is interesting. Thank you very much, Maria del Carmen, tone. Somebody said pronunciation, Jessica. Ana Sofia, you said fluency. And yes, so it is good that we are both thinking about the different perspectives. You are thinking of all the issues that come from the user of the language. And I'm presenting the issues from the one having to assess. So for example, as an assessor, there are all those issues. Is the learner fluent when they speak? Well, I have to be objective marking that. Fluent in which context? I mean, the little guy is being assessed. He might be nervous. That's why probably he's not speaking. He might be thinking about the answer, and that's why he probably is not fluent. So I have to be objective when I mark him, and I have to consider all those things. Then I have to be reliable, assessing the learner. What is this? I'm going to give Pedrito 5 minutes to speak, but I'm going to give Marta only 2 minutes to speak. Can I give them the same mark? Can I mark them under the same criteria? You know, I have to be reliable, at least have some sort of a standard within my classroom when I assess them, so that I know that if Pedro got at an 8.5 and Susie got a 5.5 in speaking, it is reliable within the entire group. I mean, I gave them all a fair chance. Then timing, that's what I was telling you, large classes. Imagine trying to assess 30, 45 kids. How do you assess them all in one period when you have to do several testing per month, per period, semestral, you know? And then you have to make sure that what you ask the learner to do to prove to you that they can speak is clear and unambiguous. I mean, many a time I have heard examples of tests such as, tell me what you did yesterday. And it's like, well, the same as I did the day before. And that's what is going on in their head, not what they tell you. And thinking, nothing. Or for example, tell me about your holidays. Well, I didn't go out. I didn't have holidays. I didn't do anything. My life didn't change. And that's what the kid is thinking. So we really have to be very careful with how we assess this very complex skill. So how can we test the speaking? Promise you, this is the only second video of this talk. So the last one. Here it goes. Let's hope technology works beautifully as well. Listen to this. Oh, no, it didn't. There it goes.
There are many different approaches to assessing speaking. The most commonly used formats are the interview, which can have one test taker and one or more examiners. The oral presentation, with one test taker speaking to a real or imagined audience. The interactive task, with at least 2 or more test takers working together, often to solve a problem or make a decision. The group discussion task, with 4 to 6 test takers. There are lots of different tasks that are used in tests of speaking. Some commonly used tasks are describing something. This can be a picture, a place, a person, or even an action. Telling a story. This can be based on a single picture, on a series of pictures, or it can simply be invented. Compare things. These can be real objects, photographs or artwork, or even abstract concepts. Give some personal information. This might involve talking about your family, hobby, hometown, or some experience you've had, such as a holiday. All of these can be done in different settings. They can be performed live in front of one or more examiners. They can be recorded and evaluated later by one or more examiners. The test taker can also talk over the phone to an examiner or to a recording device. Yet another option is for the test taker to communicate via a computer or tablet with the examiner either live or working from a recording. In all these situations, the examiners award a score or grade based on what they have observed.
Based on what you heard, what do you think is the most difficult to manage? A, B, or C? Can you write it in the chat? You decide for you, in your context. You heard about formats, you heard about tasks, you heard about settings. In other words, the type of interaction, the number of people, the things that the test taker has to do, and the setting, where and how the test takes place. What do you think, for you, is the most difficult to manage in your context? A couple of seconds for people to try to make their decisions. And Maria Elena, by the way, we will talk about accuracy. I haven't forgotten that. I've got it written down. We'll go back to that, promise you. So, so some people are saying, yes, Rebecca, you're saying, yeah, it's difficult. The formats are difficult. For example, Julio, you are saying the setting. Francisco, Javier, you're saying the task is difficult for me. Okay, good. I mean, just keep on writing. Juan Jose, you're saying the setting is difficult. Let's look at each one of them to see if probably some ideas that I have here could help you. So formats. There are many formats to give this test, to give a speaking test. You can decide to do an interview, but that is difficult when you have got large groups or groups of 30, 35 people. Giving each one of them an opportunity then leaves you with other 34 kids making a riot or something like that. Or a presentation, they get a bit boring for children when they have to stand up and say something. It's like, how many times can you hear the same topic for fairness of the task? Interactive tasks are actually good, but you have to manage 2 people, or in your group discussion, 4 to 6 people at the same time. But for example, I gave you the group discussion example, a board game. What about if they do a board game and you hear what they say? Remember, it's difficult because we're talking about kids who are at the very, very early stage of the language development, the kids that you deal with. And so a lot is going to be the first language, but within that first language, there's a lot of second language. And this is when you really need to understand, what am I after? And that's why I want to go back to Maria Elena's point about accuracy being an issue. Well, I'll get back to that in a minute. I don't forget. So think about the kind of formats that you can create in your classroom. 2 people working in an activity and you going by and listening. I know that technology is not always available everywhere. Where it is available, you can have kids record themselves doing an activity and then they send it to you. That's fantastic. But when we don't have these, it's only you moving around the classroom, then you have to really think of what you are after in this assessment. So let's not forget that. I will come back to the format when we think about how you mark the test, the outcomes. Tasks, well, there are different types of tasks, and you heard the video. There are describing something like a picture, a place, a person, telling a story based on a series of pictures or a single picture. You also have comparing things. And by the way, we will send the presentation to the authorities and find ways to distribute this for you so that you can have it with you and you can always review it. So you can also have giving some personal information, talking about your family, your hobby, your hometown. How does this translate? How does this translate into practical things? We'll see in a minute. I'm going to show you some examples for the age of your students. And then the next thing we said was, see, hello? Yes, the settings. The settings are interesting because the setting is our classroom. Let's not think of other things. I mean, what is the setting? You cannot find time away from the classroom. But now with this health crisis that we're living, probably some of us have to go creative. And so instead of thinking, well, the setting is my classroom, why don't you think the setting is different environments? And it could be recorded or it could be performed live. I mean, a lot of people say that they would never give a kid the opportunity to record. And this is not you, but I've heard it in other places, in other contexts, where teachers say, oh, I would never allow them to record something on a mobile phone and then use that to give them a grade of speaking. And I always challenge that. And I say, well, it all depends on what you're after. What are you after? You cannot evaluate everything in one event or episode. If you, for example, want to see pronunciation, then have them recorded at home. It doesn't matter that they rehearse it 3-4 times. What they're showing you is their very best. So use that to grade them. You see, that's my proposal. They could even record themselves, telling you a little bit of an anecdote, like live. You can see the kid recording themselves with proper, obviously, permissions to have recorded videos of children. But the parents record themselves and give you permission to see it. And then when they are telling you the story, they are not reading it aloud. Probably they memorize it, but you are not evaluating memorizing. So who cares? As long as you can hear that what they are saying makes sense, that their intonation is accurate, that there's at least some level of fluency, that they have tone and pitch, that they are using the right vocabulary. You see, this is when you have to know, what are you testing? Are you testing the system, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation, or are you testing the system together with the other elements of speaking, which is putting ideas in a coherent way? I'll leave that to you for consideration. So live performances, face-to-face, over the phone, which, by the way, is something very popular now in Europe. I first heard of it in France, where the teacher would call the student and they had a short conversation, and that was a test. I've also seen it in Mexico. In Guanajuato, I saw it, one institution, higher education, doing it for kids. Not for kids, for actually students, adults, sorry. Via internet, well, if the technology allows, that's brilliant. But if not, well, I mean, these are just proposals. So let me start coming to, I mean, we have a couple of minutes still to go before I open the floor for some questions. But I would like to show you examples. And these examples come from one of our UK partners, Cambridge Assessment English. You will see where I took them from. This is a public document, so I'm not bridging any regulations of testing. And why did I choose them? Because, well, for me, they are authority in testing the age range that you teach. We at the British Council have APTIS, which is a good test for teens. We have APTIS teens, but it's for 13-year-olds and onwards. But for testing children, you really required a lot of analysis, a lot of research. It's not easy to test children. In fact, for example, at the British Council, when our students come to the center to study, kids are not tested because we have a policy and it's difficult for us to understand how to test them. However, our colleagues, our UK partners, Cambridge Assessment English, have got some very good, very well-tested tests for children. So I took examples from them. So look at this. We have got describe these two pictures and say what the differences are. Instructions are more or less like that in the exam. And what are you testing? Well, you are testing you're using one of the tasks, which is comparing things. Now, you look at these pictures and you think, oh, but my children could never compare the pictures. Hang on a minute. When we teach the language, we need to think of the level of ability, of thinking skill of the learner that is compatible to the age. So we're talking about little kids who are also still developing their first language. So if you're thinking of a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, what I would expect the child to say to me, and I was an examiner of children for many years, what the children said to me in this kind of test was, and they would point, I don't know if you can, no, you cannot see me, I think, but they would point at one or the other picture. They would put their finger on the first picture, say the picture that you see on your left, and they would say, here, clouds. And then they would point at the other picture on the right, and they would say, here, no clouds. For me, as an examiner trained by Cambridge, that is speaking, because they are realizing a social function, which is telling me something from this picture that is different. They are completing a task. They have said what is different. So I put that forward to you. You don't expect a child to say, well, the difference is that in the first picture you can see this. No, it all depends on their cognitive development. For example, in this picture describing something, as long as the child says clock, window, chair, red chair, milk, banana, oranges, they are describing the picture. Family, toys, that is describing the picture of the cognitive development of a child starting to use a foreign language. For example, giving some personal information. So you can say, what is this? What color is it? So the child will say, blouse, shirt, top. What color is it? Blue. What are your favorite clothes? Ah, that's personal information. That's not in the picture, but the picture has already generated the input, the stimulus. Do you wear uniform to school? Yes, no. What color is it? That is personal information. No, my family lives here. I have got 3 brothers. Of course, no, they cannot say that. They don't even have the grammar. Telling a story. Again, telling a story is a very complex task, but Cambridge has figured it out. For Cambridge, the expected outcome of these is, in the first picture, I see Nick and Anna. They in a school. Second picture, they see out window. Third picture, teacher walk to tree. Fourth picture, teacher help cat. And teacher rescue cat. And if they cannot say rescue, teacher has cat. Teacher cat in hands. And for Cambridge, that's telling a story at the level of the cognitive development of children between the 6-7-year-old. So think about that, okay, when testing your children. And let's start closing off. Scoring and grading. It's very important that when you do this, you have some sort of rating scale. In other words, what do you expect the child to do? This is what I did or imitated from what I've seen in tests. I will have written down. My expected outcome is to hear this from the child, and that's it. So if they are able to say all this, they will get a 10. If they are able to say only half of this, they will get a 6. If they are only able to say 1 or 2 things of that, probably they will get a 5. And you decide if they are failing grades or not. And here are some comments. Different tasks elicit different functions. So you have to have that in mind. Different tasks will produce different social practices. Okay, so take all that into account. Sorry, here I wanted to go, before we close, I think I can spare 1 minute. Yes, Denise, 1 minute. I want to go back to the question or to the issue that Maria Elena had brought up. Accuracy. If in your rating scale, you don't describe accuracy, pronunciation as something you want to assess, then you don't care for it. So it doesn't matter that your kid, your student doesn't use grammar properly. In fact, in the first level of Cambridge Assessment English testing, which is starters, grammar is not even considered in the rating scale. Nobody cares if the child can use grammar or not. Nobody would expect the child to use grammar. So this is very important for you to know. When you speaking, try to focus on the skill, not on the system. And if you decide to include the system, like for example, Cambridge Assessment, when I'm going to go back to this, when Cambridge Assessment uses this for movers, and this is a little bit higher level. They say, okay, I don't want grammar, but I want more accurate vocabulary. At least that the child knows the basic, like ball, boat, cloud, sun, frog, fish, bottles, and knows how to count. So the decision of accuracy will be based on what you decide your scale will look like. So any questions now? I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Sí.
Right.
Hi. Yes, we have many questions, and yes, a lot of teachers saying hello from all around Mexico. A lot of states present: Monterrey, Puebla, Nuevo León, Morelos, Yucatán, Estado de México, Baja California, Guerrero, Oaxaca, Quintana Roo, Chihuahua, Tlaxcala, Querétaro, Sonora, Guanajuato. All of them say hello. Most all the country is here, just hearing your webinar. And they have questions. Maria Teresa is asking, can you share with us some pieces of advice about how to develop a speaking evaluation?
Yes, definitely. Think of the tasks that you use in the classroom, like in the video. Thank you, Adri. Like in the video, it said, whatever you ask the child to do, whatever you teach the child or expect the child to learn, should be what you use for testing. So if you have social practices, if your social practice is to, Susie was talking about all these social practices in the book. I don't want to forget. But for example, they want to describe an event. That's your social practice. The event can be breakfast. That's the event. So describe the event. So think of how you taught it or how the book that you're using taught describing the event. For example, in the morning, I have breakfast. I drink milk, eat a sandwich. That is enough. Now, that's what has to happen in the exam. Exactly that. So your instruction has to be the same. You can provide a stimulus, for example, pictures, flashcards, and you can say, describe today's breakfast, and you put in front a glass of orange juice, pictures, a glass of orange juice, and say a piece of bread. And the kid has to describe that event. Yes, today I have breakfast. I drink orange juice and I eat bread. That's describing an event, and that's a social practice. So that's what I would do. Try to do what you do in the classroom, because if you don't use the same task, then you might be evaluating a different social practice. Thank you, Adi. You are in mute, Adi.
Thank you, Liliana. Sorry. And yes, we have several questions about large classrooms. For example, one of the questions from Julieta Sarsa is, if I have 50 students in classroom, how can I assess speaking? They are asking about how can they assess groups of 30, 40, 50 students.
Yes, definitely. And I want to take here there's someone, teacher Pablo asked the question in the chat, which is, how do you assess the students online? Because my answer would be, there are resources online, definitely. But if you don't have them, what do? Well, then you change the format. You don't do one-to-one. You will never finish. Never in the world. You will never finish. So, for example, you can use drama. You can ask them, and this is something interesting. If a child memorizes a speech in a little play, and I'm talking a play of 2 or 3 exchanges, a play at a restaurant, a role play, one acts as the waiter and the other as the client. So, hello, yes, can I help you? If the learner memorizes the speech, you can still evaluate fluency, because he will need to receive the language from the other partner to be able to answer. And there's decoding. You can even tell if he is not listening to the partner, if he gives 2 questions at the same time. I mean, testing is not like, unless you were testing for entering university, there are a lot of, this is language. You don't really need to test on the conditions of nobody can say the same as the other person. This is use of the language. If a child can actually stand up and enact a role play and say something that to you sounds intelligible, so pronunciation is accurate, the use of vocabulary is not bad. Yes, they pre-planned it, but when they are there, they are also concerned about acting it. So they are playing a social role. Why should you worry so much about not saying something that somebody else said, copying? For example, teacher Pablo, copying online, it all depends on what you're looking for. When, for example, Cambridge Assessment used to have some test bullets, I think, online. And when you heard the person sort of reciting their speech, they had just questions and they had to record them. So it was a question and they had to record the answer. It didn't matter if the wife had scripted the sentence. They had to make sense when they said it. And sense is also tone and intonation. So depending on which format you select, it will also dictate what criteria you choose to assess. So you cannot assess everything in every single test. You decide what you want to assess. Speaking is not just one global thing. You see what I mean? So my recommendation is use group tests. As I said, do a game, do a competition, see how the kids are problem solving, that the kids will use Spanish, but within all that Spanish, they will also use English. And that's when you move around and evaluate, collecting from, okay, you have your list and you start hearing this one use it, because even having the courage to use the language should be appreciated. Even for example, to say, how do you say? You can even do ongoing assessment. Instead of giving moments to assess, you assess throughout progressively. So every time that a child asks a question, you assess that and you write a note in your book and say, yes, he knows how to say the question. He knows how to ask questions properly. He has met the social function. So instead of doing one moment for 30 kids, use the 30 days for the 30 group in the group. And by the way, there was another question, sorry, Adri, because somebody said, what about teenagers with lower level of English? Because I referred to children with lower level of English. Remember that an adult with a lower level of English speaks like a kid with a lower level of English. I have a neighbor, I always tell this story. I had a neighbor that had very little English, and every time I saw him in the morning, he would say, Liliana, morning. Jim, good. Me, natation, enjoy. And he was highly communicative. He was older than me, and I always appreciated the intent, the effort, the message. I replied to him, yes, I'm going swimming. You too? Very well, because we were communicatively functioning. So don't think that, yes, they have conceptually, they have other things in their head, and that's why they have so much trouble. To say what they have in their head, they want to say it in English and then make all the mistakes in the world. But when you assess, you have to consider that their English, if it is basic, is as basic as a child's. Sorry, Adri.
And is it the same when we are talking about practicing speaking in those large groups? How can they practice speaking? Is in the same way?
In the same way, I mean, a lot of role plays. I mean, in the books that all of you have, because I sat in one of the sessions that talked about books in this jornadas. And yes, I mean, the books are instruments. So find the best example, model for them, and this is something that we're going to talk in a couple of minutes. Listening is actually a skill that goes hand in hand with speaking. So model for them and then let them try. Even imitating a role play will prove a speaking. Because the speaking is opening your mouth, moving your lips, and letting those words out. Now, what happens here will depend on what input you gave. So, and also the input is what question you ask. So they open their mouth, they move their lips, and something has come out because of the task that you set for them. to produce the language.
Okay. We have another question. Juan Francisco Sanchez is asking, how effective is self-assessment and peer feedback to assess speaking?
Again, sorry, Adri, come. What?
How effective is self-assessment and peer feedback to assess speaking?
Self-assessment. No, see, I understood the peer assessment. Self-assessment. Okay, peer assessment is really very good. Very good if you know what you are, and this wouldn't work that well for children. This will work for older children. Yes, let them assess each other, but tell them what they are after. Don't give them the scriptures, accuracy, fluency, vocabulary. No. Somebody wrote there that I was talking about understanding the message. Speaking, it also involves understanding so that when you reply, the answer is appropriate. We have just demonstrated it, Adri. If I hadn't asked for clarification, I would have answered something else. So my speaking would have been incomprehensible or not coherent or appropriate. That's how we call it in examining. It wouldn't have been appropriate if I had answered something else. So yes, for example, in a starter's exam of Cambridge, the speaking test evaluates receptiveness. In other words, did the kid understand what you ask? Because that's part of the speaking. And it's in the speaking test, not in the listening test. So the examiner says, where is the cat? And the child has to point at the cat. And that is in the speaking test, not in the listening test. It's interesting, no? And peer assessment works because you encourage people to look at things. So if your children in the classroom, you give them not the descriptors, but you say, did you understand your partner? Yes or no? You can say, did he say hello? Yes or no? Then the child assessing will also have to pay attention to, oh, he said hello in a different way than I would say hello. Or did he say hello? I didn't hear that. But of course, with kids, you will need to have some sort of backup plan because the self-assessment and the peer assessment would not be enough. It wouldn't be reliable enough, or it wouldn't be valid enough to give a kid a grade that goes into their final mark. But it will certainly help you a lot. It will create some sort of culture of assessment, and children will see assessment as something more friendly and accessible. For secondary, somebody said a tip for secondary, definitely work on the tasks. Make task-oriented tests. In other words, not just come in front and give a presentation. Use TPR, where somebody, mimicry. Somebody does TPR and another in the team is narrating what's happening. Or in pairs, they take turns and one starts doing, the other starts narrating, and cannot narrate from a piece of paper, has to narrate by looking. And he is putting butter on the bread, and now he is making a sandwich, and now, it's a social function as well. It's describing an event.
Okay, and we have just 2 minutes more, but many teachers talk about motivations. They are asking about motivation, and they say, for example, how am I do for my students' motivation to practice this skill every time in the classroom? How can we motivate our students to speak?
Yes, definitely. Well, how do you motivate them to speak? It's in the task again. If the task doesn't have something interesting to say, personalize things, and let them say everything they want to say. For example, show them a little clip of a video, preferably a song, and give them on the board adjectives to describe the song. And tell them, what do you think of the singer? Ugly. I don't like it. They are already speaking. If you let them express themselves, but sometimes we don't let them express themselves because we're so concerned that we see the function of the social practice realized that we forget that they want to say something. And then don't be afraid of letting them use their first language. The first language patches. I know, va a sonar bien pocho, they say 2 words in English y luego dicen 3 en español, and then they go back to the other. But si están usando un poquito de inglés, what's the problem? Sorry, I just wanted to exemplify. What's the problem? Let them have confidence. Let them feel the language. Let them enjoy the language, you know? But if we just stop, no, how do you say that? No, that's not correct. Overcorrection inhibits motivation to speak. I think we've done.
Yes, and I think that answer can help to Noé Martinez, who says many students tend to block themselves when they don't know how to pronunciate a word, even if they know it. What is a good tip for these matters?
Well, they have to practice. You have to give them the correct example, and you don't have to know how to pronounce everything perfectly. That's why there are apps on the phone or Google it. And if you don't have technology, call someone. Find me on Twitter, and we'll talk about it. We'll find someone. We'll ask Andrew to pronounce it for you. I sometimes don't know how to pronounce things, but I try. Confidence. Yes. Give them confidence.
Okay, thank you, Liliana. I think we have finished. The time is over. But it has been very interesting and a lot of questions. But maybe later we can answer them.
Sure. Thank you very much, Adri.
Muchas gracias, querida Liliana, por esta participación. Les comento a nuestros seguidores, a los invitados que están realizando esta actividad, que Liliana no se despide el día de hoy. El día de hoy la siguiente charla va a ser sumamente importante para todos ustedes porque va a abordar el tema de evaluación, que es quizás uno de los problemas que más se enfrentan por los contextos tan diferentes a los cuales día a día están trabajando. Y bueno, comentarles, aquí Juan Carlos que me acompaña, que ninguno de los comentarios del chat sobra, todos los estamos revisando, los estamos analizando, las aportaciones, las ideas son útiles. Quiero comentar justamente que Gabriela Sosa nos hace una pregunta, bueno, un planteamiento muy interesante, que dice, hace falta una sesión que hable de cómo hacer exámenes de diagnóstico, sobre todo cuando regresamos de la pandemia. Y eso nos ocupa, Gabriela, creo que es un tema relevante. Vamos a hacer lo posible por encontrar información que les sea muy útil, que les sea, como han visto en varios de los webinars, muy concreta, muy específica. Sabemos que cada caso es diferente, cada situación que enfrentan no les podríamos dar una solución tan personalizada, pero sí darles el contexto. Y en eso creo que nos ocupamos. Juan Carlos, pues ahí tenemos una tarea para la otra semana, tratar de abrir un espacio y con gusto. Y como estos planteamientos seguimos leyéndolos, les invitamos pues en unos minutos más a conectarse con Liliana y seguir esta segunda actividad. Juan Carlos, pues para despedir a la audiencia.
Pues muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos y nos vemos en 10 minutitos más en su otra liga en el Classroom.